Hello and welcome to the Mystic Chat. So today on the show, we are going to talk about how to find your path on witchcraft, or some of our ideas about how to find your path and things like that, because there's so many. But first, let me introduce myself. I am Chris Allen. I am a queer pagan minister, an author, a teacher, a healer, um, blah, 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 blah. Laura, would you introduce yourself really quickly?
Hi, my name is Laura Gonzalez. I'm a priestess. I'm a minister. I am a witch for hire. And I am also an author and a podcaster and a video blogger and a dog mom and a grandmother of a 15-year-old child that was 15 2 days ago. I can't believe that. And I don't know, that's all I have today. And I'm so glad to be here. It feels like forever. And may I introduce you to my other bestie, Frater Aaron.
Hi, I'm Frater Aaron. I'm a magician in an armchair. Actually, I'm in a rolly chair today. I forgot to switch it out. So a magician in a roller chair. I'm a graduate of the Mystery School of the Fellowship of the Phoenix and host of the podcast Storybook, Sacred Lore of Witchcraft.
So before we get into it, let's do a few plugs. So I'm having a book come out. Technically, if you're here in Chicago, it's already out at the Malloway store. However, if you don't live here in Chicago, you can order it directly from the publisher, Crosscrow Books, or Amazon. And this is the book. It's called The Black Book of Jonathan for Not Bristle, the Charmer, A Devil's Parable. And what it is, it's a first-person account about a young male witch in the American United States, whose family died, and the devil comes and gives him the powers of a witch, and this is his journey. And it's also his spell book as well, so you're privy to his spells. And so where I got the idea is that I work a lot with witch ancestors, and this is their story. Frater Aaron, plug you what you're doing. What are you doing? What's exciting?
As I mentioned, I have a podcast called Storybook, Sacred Lore of Witchcraft, and the idea of the podcast is to look at European fairy tales, folklore, extending hopefully into world folklore, as if these were our sacred reading practices, and from that to craft a craft practice that is less centered than has come in vogue on biblical foundations. We'll go with that explanation today.
And since we're plugging, I'm gonna plug, of course, my Lunatic Mondays. I used to do Lunatic Mondays, Lunes Lunaticos, a podcast on English and Spanish. It had transitioned to just Lunatic Mondays, and it airs on the second and fourth Monday of the month. And I basically interviewing wonderful authors from all these different magical publishing houses. Like last week we have the Verlip. Very soon we're gonna have Wick Malloway and the one and only Chris Allen from Crosscrow Books, and we have had other authors from Mundus Publications. I forgot the name, but anyway, I'm interviewing all kinds of authors, and you can find them wherever you find your podcast as Lunatic Mondays, or you can catch them live on the second and fourth Monday of the month. And speaking of Malloway, I'm gonna be there tomorrow, and I'm gonna grab me a copy of your book, Chris. Yes, I will. And yeah, it's gonna be so much fun. So come tomorrow to Maliway Brothers if you're in the Chicagoland area. We're gonna be doing tarot readings, and the Lip is gonna be doing some book signing and whatnot.
Yeah, I heard about all that. I'm sad. On Fridays, I am a chaplain intern at the hospital, so I'll be being supportive, get people going through grief and things like that. All right, so Path of Witchcraft. So I thought it might be interesting if we all share in brief how each of us found our path, and go from there. So for myself, in my family, I say this all the time. You know, my mother had dreams. She was very psychic. But for her, it all came from Jesus. And my father was very religious. Jesus this, Jesus that. And so we had a very spiritual family. So, and I lived in the country. And so we would play in the woods all the time. And I would, hear about these psychic things and spirits and ghosts and play in the woods. So I was open to seeing spirits and things. And I always felt them around. And when I was 17, I found Raymond Buckland's big book of witchcraft. But when you're 17, it was kind of cool and stuff at the time. And then, when I was I taught myself a lot for a few years, and so when I turned 25, I got formal magical training and became ordained at 26 or 27, no, 26. And then I went from there. I'm part Cherokee, so I decided to learn more about Native American spirituality. I'm a massage therapist, so I was like, oh, I need to learn Reiki, and so I learned ceremonial magic and Reiki and all those things. And so, and then I became initiated into traditional witchcraft at 27. And then, so for myself, it was kind of like I was already open to it, and I just kind of found things I liked. And one thing I want to say for myself that I think everyone could benefit for, I didn't pick a tradition, take training, and stop. To this day, I'm constantly learning and reading and learning from other cultures and other gurus, shamans, priests, some healers, whatever, Laura, well, what was your path like?
It was similar in a way because my dad was a very religious Catholic man, and I say very religious with air quotes because he was also a New Ager when being a New Ager was new, like back in the 60s and 70s, and he will meditate. And I will never forget, he had a cardboard pyramid, and he will sit inside of it and say that it was to be young forever. And my mom was very much a natural witch, though I never heard her call herself that. So we grew up with all this woo-woo stuff in the house, and I think all of us, my siblings and I, have certain kind of like psychic abilities, but I'm the one that had the most. So I was very religious. I went on my own to do my first communion, and I was a very involved with Jesus kind of child until I started asking, why do I see things and why do I have a psychic ability? And the people at the church started telling me because I was the devil and because I was a woman and I was obviously cursed and demonic. So I say, okay, thank you, bye. And I started learning about paganism, which make a lot more sense to me, combined with native traditions, which in Mexico is not, you're not in a tribe, but you're not detribalized. It's very strange and very hard to explain. But it was also connected with this Mexica traditions and philosophies. And then when I came to the United States, I found that witches, pagan witches, had a religion, and that was Wicca. And I'm one of the people that truly believed that that was the ancient religion. And so I joined Wicca faster than you can say it, just to find out that it's so ancient. It's also, what, 70 years old, ancient? So at the same time that I started studying Wicca, eclectic Wicca, I discovered the goddess tradition, and that's my home. That has been my home, and I think that will be my home forever, because we are on the left side of the left side of the left side of the table, almost falling off the table. How left we are. We're very radical. We're very I say what I practice is feminist empowered witchcraft. I have been calling it that for like a month now. I don't know where I fit, but it's definitely goddess tradition and goddess center, but very, very inclusive. So that's kind of my path. And it always has revolved around my psychic abilities.
Right.
That is for sure. It's always has been kind of like you about the psychic things. I also did the Reiki thing because I used to heal with hands, and people will ask me, "What is it, Reiki?" And I'm like, "No, it's not." So I finally did the Reiki, so I can now say, "Yeah, it's Reiki." So I do both, healing with hands and Reiki. What about you, Aaron?
Let's see. I saw an article recently because of Chris, you posted an article about patron deities, and I think we should come back to that probably as we go on about our path.
Yeah.
But because of that, I saw another article linked to it on Patheos about escaping, what was it? Exercising fundamentalism, and it's the author John Beckett's journey from fundamental Christianity into paganism, neo-paganism. And I did not have a hardcore fundamental background. I was, raised nominally Christian. But I remember being in like the catechism classes and having to recite the Nicene Creed and explain it and things like that during the classes, and talking like this, like I was ashamed of what I was saying because I didn't really, I didn't agree with any of it really. And I don't know, I think we did that sometime between 12 and 14. In late high school, early college was when I would have formally been introduced to craft teachings through books. And the first majorly influential book I remember is Starhawk's Spiral Dance. And I still love it, and not so much because it's what I practice, but because it was, it was like my introduction to this whole life that I've had since. So in that sense, it has a special place in my heart and nostalgia. And I will say, pound for pound price, you get a lot more exercises in that book than most things that come out now. But you also get a lot of fantastical histories. Eventually I had formal training and went through the mystery school at the Fellowship of the Phoenix. It graduated in 2010 or 2011. And following that, it would seem I've been practicing traditional witchcraft since 2012, which kind of blows my mind. I still feel like I'm a newbie in the craft. So that's really funny to me to sit here and realize that now.
Yeah,
it's been more than a decade.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've been a part of a lot of that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so sad you're in San Antonio, Houston, halfway in between.
Houston area.
Yeah, I'm so sad you're still gonna keep on hoping, like, come back, drop everything and come back for me. So, one of the things I see online and I hear at workshops and these conversations is, not everyone comes from a spiritual background or a psychic background or whatever. And this is just me personally, but I think that there's two types of people who come into witchcraft. The people who have some type of a psychic ability, whatever it is, and it can be anything, and they feel the call. They feel the call to be something more. And then you have the people who think it's a cool and want power over versus power with, which is a whole different thing. But you know, I used to tell people, try everything, see what you like. And I think that's okay to say, but now there's so much. Like there's crystals and herbs and traditional craft and ceremonial, and there's energy work. Like what? Like either of you, what would you say to someone who says, "Hey, and I feel like calling to do witchcraft, yeah, but how do I know which place to start? Where do I go first?"
I have to give credit to, and I forgot to say, by the way, that I became a minister in Circle Sanctuary. I did my training with them from 2017 to 2020, and I became a priestess of the goddess with a fraternity of the goddess in Mexico. I was made into a priestess against my will. More on that later if you want to. But I will never forget, it was Shana Aranite who told me, being a witch is a job title. And I'm very thankful for that she told me that, because I encountered that being a witch, or in my case, particularly being a healer or being a minister, is a job title. You know, you're here to work with the community, for the community, to help as much as you can, obviously. And I have to learn the hard way that boundaries are a thing, and that if you want to become a minister or being a witch and to help your community, you got to have very, very healthy boundaries about when and how you help. But for people that want to just practice, I will ask that, you know, you want to practice just to have a personal practice, or do you actually want to serve the community, or do you want to be famous? You know, because if what you want is you want to be famous, then go to TikTok and say some spells and then you'll become famous. But I think it will be about, what do you really want? What are you looking for? And yeah, to know exactly what you don't want. For example, I am not the kind of person that likes to do daily devotional, feed your ancestors, set the altar, put the wine, put the water, cook for them every day. I don't do that. So I wouldn't get into any traditions that do that. Like you, Chris, I think you do like the daily devotion and you feed your ancestors and all of that. I just couldn't. It's not
So
for
I
me.
don't cook for them every day. Like sometimes I haven't cooked. And so normally in my personal practice, unless it's a holiday or something, I don't say I'm cooking exclusively for the ancestors. I give them about a little bit of my food I already make, whatever. So it isn't like, I have to tell you, the part of working with spirits is cleaning up all the offerings. That's the hard part. What about you, Frater? What do you think?
I was asked recently, but it was in the context of someone asked where they could learn more about shamanism. And I was like, oh, okay. By shamanism, you mean, because that's, you know, and it could be like Laura's saying, it could be the same with witchcraft. There's so many ideas of what these terms mean, which may be included in an actual definition of the term or not, you know, like there's just people have so many ideas of these terms. I would follow, like Laura was saying, one, push back a little bit on what the reason for the calling is, and not because not because I have any, authority to push or present anybody from following the path, but to give them a better idea of where to look. And then from there, I think a big part is what do you envision yourself doing? What appeals to you the most? What examples of the craft appeal to you the most? And as I'm sure all three of us know, like, that's going to change kind of throughout your life. So you can start with, what is calling to you now.
For me, it was spells. And I think it's everyone at first, like this whole idea of spells and things. And the funny thing is, oh my God. So I hear all the time that the reason everyone, and how you're supposed to generalize, but I hear this, the reason everyone got into witchcraft is because of the spells and having power over people, because those are the people who felt less than, unpopular in school, didn't have friends, had some type of, and this may or may not be true for some people, had some type of a spiritual trauma, but there was something like unwhole about him that led them to witchcraft. That's not the case for myself. I'm a healer, and so I do believe in energy healing. I believe that you can, work with spirit helpers of herbs and trees and heal and things like that. But for myself, I was popular in high school. I didn't have that problem. I had, my family was, quote, all American, formal, whatever that means. I mean, Southern, and that's a whole other thing. But I go back and forth. I reject the idea that all people who come to witchcraft are broken. I reject that, because we're not broken. We may need some healing of some sort, like emotional, mental, physical, but we're not broken. However, the people who do come to witchcraft or the spells, I think it's fine. I think it's normal, as long as you don't stay there. Meaning, like Laura talked about, she started here and found the goddess, and that's her joy. That's what fills her up. And for myself, it's the gods, it's the ancestors. That's what gives me joy. However, I don't think that for all people, you have to, just like Laura said, have to have a daily spiritual practice. I tell students all the time, you can do powerful spells by going outside and connecting to the sun, the earth, the moon, the trees. That's magic. So you don't have to, like, I'm gonna cast this spell, da 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 da, or I have to call all these spirits. I mean, I do. I work with spirits. I don't think you have to. But for me, I think you need to find your joy, whatever that is. Like, I love all things dark and creepy, like skulls, the dead, all of it. But I also like the Flower Maiden. I love Beltane. I love, my God is Asclepius, the God of healing. He's the sun. So I like all that too. What do you guys think?
I think it's common that, well, of course, the stereotype exists for a reason, and many of us do come here seeking some form of wish fulfillment or power. But also, I think I probably know nearly as many people who came here simply looking, choosing to follow a religion that better aligned with their ideals and their beliefs. And so it wasn't it wasn't necessarily a power trip, but it was that they did believe in the sacredness of the earth, and were looking, or sacredness of human rights, and we're looking for a religion that matched those ideals. I actually have a question too, though. Like, what is a practice without either spells and or spirit work witchcraft?
That's the $6 million question, because what is witchcraft? There are
Exactly.
so many different kinds of witchcraft, because for example, Mexican folk magic is Catholic witchcraft. And for some folks, the majority, I'm gonna go ahead and assume the majority of people who are watching this that are not of Mexican descent listen to Catholic witchcraft, and they're gonna be like, that is impossible. Look at Mexicans. It's very possible. We do it all the time, and it's kind of part of our DNA. So is that witchcraft with a religious practice? Absolutely. Is it witchcraft like we think about it in paganism? No. Now, I know a lot of pagans who follow paganism as a religion, but don't do spells because they don't like the witchcraft aspect of it. So for a lot of people, witchcraft is spell making. And if you ask me, Laura Gonzalez, I believe that everything that we do is magical. You've heard me say it a million times before. You're a witch, act like one. Meaning, think like a witch, act like a witch, move on everyday life as a witch. So when I say that I don't do daily devotional, it's a yes or no. Yes and no, because I do not do the daily fit in the altar or whatever, but I do the daily fit in the witch, and checking myself and doing, like some people say witchcraft is just spicy psychology. I love that. And I know that is tongue in cheek and they say it in a cynical way. I don't care. I like that. I like that people consider, because I consider witchcraft spicy psychology. It works for me. So what is witchcraft? And I don't know, man. I've seen back in the day, like a million years ago, when I was part of the Center of the Elemental Spirit here in Chicago, it was so heavily religious, but on every ritual that we did, we will do spell work. And some members of that very group will say, but I don't do spell work. And I'm like, yes, you do, because you're here raising energy, etc. So I don't know. I couldn't tell you where the line is between being just a religious practice or being just witchcraft, because I cannot see that line. I don't know about you, Chris.
It's funny. Being a Gemini, I go back and forth all the time. So if you want to be pedantic, the word witch, not the action, but the actual word witch really wasn't used until like 1200 or 1300, but they use things like sorcerer, magician, things like that. I think it depends upon your point of view, yeah, because if you ask the witch hunters, and which is this, this, and this, and this. Like, and then you hear people say, oh, but the Greeks had Medea, she was a witch. Well, they didn't use that word, they use sorcerer. So if we're talking about that is spells. I took a class with him and Matthew Venus, and I'm gonna give him some props. If you've ever taken a class from Matthew Venus, take a class from Matthew Venus. He knows everything, and he does. Sometimes I like to take a witchcraft class from people just to see a different point of view than my own. He said something that just really resonated with me. Witchcraft as it is in 2022 or even, the 1800s, is actually a rebranding of what witchcraft used to be, meaning, yes, if you do any kind of spells or energy work, we call it witchcraft. However, in other cultures, like in Lakota, they do all those things. They call spirits, hands-on healing. If you call them a witch, they'll ask you to leave. It's offensive. And the reason is because they are using that old definition of blight the crops, kill people, and curse people also. And everyone here, I think, knows this. Native American tribes were not allowed to do their holy sacred ceremonies of healing and community celebration because the colonizers called it witchcraft and Satan worship. So even today, like my teacher Billy Topatache, who taught me, a lot of my Lakota ceremony, says, I know what that means. I'm very aware of the goddess movement. I'm very aware of it. However, when I take you to a ceremony, do not use that word. And she goes, I know that's how you identify. Do not use that word because people don't understand. And it's hard to take that out of their minds. One of my friends says, she's like, oh, anytime you spray perfume and someone has a reaction to it, like they enjoy it, that's witchcraft. I don't call that witchcraft. I call that like aromatherapy or something like that. But there's other people who do, because it was my intention to make blank happen, and it did, whatever. So that's where it gets hard about the definition for me. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, what you were saying, like, those terms in the past, often it was like poisoner, would have been
Right.
how it was could have been translated, it was like poisoner or potioner when they talked about sorceresses. And like at the beginning of the Middle Ages, earth magic, or what was called natural magic was not considered evil or witchcraft. It was, it was specifically demonic spirit contact and baneful magic. At the same time, I don't think we should be like the Supreme Court and going by opinions from the Middle Ages. So I think it's okay that these terms have
Good
evolved
point.
and can mean something else now. And
Right.
and that's actually a good point for me to remember, because I can be a stickler about some of these things. I do think, though, we're at a time, how you mentioned like 2023 witchcraft. It's not the mainstream of the movement, but in places like Instagram and things, you see there are practices now that are going closer to historical witchcraft than probably ever before, because of so much like scholarly research that's now becoming like mass market available and things like that. And I think that's really cool.
It's interesting.
It also might be because of Sabrina, but I didn't watch it, so I'm not positive.
But
I think it might be because of Sabrina. The dark one, where the
like
devil's
the devil
actually in it.
And
Yeah.
things like that. Well, I think it's a whole different conversation, and I love this conversation about that. About people finding a path. I think that for me, one of the things I want to remind people is, what's your vibe? I think you do have to know the basics. Like, you do have to know how to center ground shield. You have to have some basic cosmology. What are the gods? What are the ancestors? What are the elves and fairies? What is that? What does that mean? You have to have your foundation, but what's your thing? Like, for myself, it's so funny because when people meet me in real life, I'm like, I jump up and down and I have fun and da 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 da. People like, you conjure the dead? I'm like, I know, isn't it weird? But you know, I know people who for themselves, like, I'm into herbs. I want to help people. Great. I know other people like, I don't want to do any of that. I want to sit in a graveyard. Great. So start from there. I would say expand your horizons, like learn about Taoism, learn about ceremonial magic, learn about um, what people call shamanism, Nikeo shamanism, things like that. Understand that. Learn about Wicca, learn about these different things, because you'll learn different techniques, but at the same time, you might find something you vibe with. Um,
And you know what?
yeah,
Pardon my interruption.
no, please.
10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I started this path of, like Wicca, for example, there were all these people being the Wicca police and being so purist and like, oh, if you practice with the Aztecs and then practice Wicca, you should call it Aztec Wicca. That's not Wicca, blah, blah. Case in point, it is good for folks that want to keep traditions. For example, that folks that want to keep Gardnerian Wicca, and that is an initiatory path, and you have to go through certain levels and certain paths and blah, blah, blah. And then there are things that are more like open and pick what you will and whatnot. I think, in my opinion, the base of harmony and love will be like, do what you will, do what makes you happy. And if being on a close tradition that has all these hurdles that you have to go through in order to be initiated, and that's what calls to you, do that.
Mhm.
But don't trash talk people like us that do the folk magic and then the native philosophies and then the witchcraft and whatnot. Because if that does not anything for you, then don't do it. I, for one, love, and thank you, Chris, because from you I learned the true meaning of necromancy. So,
I remember that.
yeah,
that conversation.
necromancy, Day of the Dead, working with bereavement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't like this super famous, now super trendy Santa Muerte. I don't work with. I don't work with it. I don't like it. It's not my vibe. I don't, And yet I understand why people vibe with it and want to work with it. And I'm like, you know what? You do you, boo. And just don't invite me to your I mean, they wouldn't invite me because I'm very vocal about I don't like it. But also don't come and like mansplain to me what it is, because if I don't like it, it's because I know what it is and I don't like it. So taking the proselytizing part out of the equation, I think, and just letting people be and do whatever they want. And if that's not for you, then that's not for you and you don't do it. But learn what it is before you jump both feet forward, or before you say, no, 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 that's not for me. Like, learn what it is first. One exercise that we had at Circle Century for the minister formation was a class on interfaith. And our homework, I will never forget, our homework was to learn and investigate a religion that we knew nothing about or we feel that we dislike. And I choose obviously something that I was completely oblivious about. And I learned so much, and it's still not for me, but I like the fact that I learned what it is about and how they work about it. And, so I guess it's just basic, logic. Aaron, I see you moving your head. Say something.
Yeah. Another recommendation that I thought about for finding your path or what calls to you if you're seeking is using the symbology of a witch's compass. So there's a gate at each of the 4 directions, and then also upper world, middle world, and underworld. And you can spend time meditating or working with the energies of each of those directions, each of those gates, to see which one calls to you, because the one that does reach out to you or that you feel more of a natural connection with will bring you into specific kinds of magical practices. Example, there's the Josephine McCarthy Magic of the North Gate, which deals specifically with the mysteries of the body and the land, because those were the mysteries of the North Gate that were presented to her. But there's these 6 other entry points that could call out to you.
Thank you. I like a lot that idea of using also tools or other means of investigation to find out what calls to you. And I'm the kind of person that try everything once, so try something, and if you completely see that you don't vibe with that, then, and there's no harm on saying no to certain things,
Mhm.
Well, I want to jump onto that because I was just having this conversation with the clergy of the Fellowship of the Phoenix about consent. And one of the things that I hate, and I've always hated, so let the record show in tradition, unless you were in a very hot climate, you didn't do your ritual skyclad. The reason if I'm in Ireland and it's cold, I need clothes. I need to be in the house with clothes on. So that was did it happen? I'm sure it did, but it wasn't like a hard and fast rule. So you have to remember, I understand the thing in some magical traditions in Wicca that, being skyclad isn't about sex. It's about being free, being body positive. It's about not judging people and not judging yourself. It's also about bravery, about you are being naked and being supported in a place of community with your circle. That being said, I think it causes lots of trauma to people who don't feel that way. I think that anytime you have any, and I will stand on a soapbox with this, any kind of sexual initiation, that's spiritual trauma. It's also abuse. That being said, if you're in a group and you're into it and that's your jam and you're like, I want to join that group that does that, then I will empower you, I will support you. The main thing is consent. One of the things that it's a lot better now. Back in the day, when you were initiated, you didn't have consent, and they didn't tell you beforehand if you had to do your initiation or your ceremony skyclad or not. You just had to deal with it. That being said, the reason I bring that up is because you have to ask yourself, what are you okay with? I do believe in challenging myself because like the few times I've had to do an initiation skyclad, it was a good challenge for me. And I'm very body positive and things like that. But I also, for me, I am a massage therapist. The only way I allow anyone to touch me is healing touch. So that means a friend hug, stuff like that. That to me is okay. If you touch me and I don't, and it doesn't feel okay, that's not healing touch to me. I don't like it. So I have to ask myself, because there are some witchcraft groups too, where some of their ceremonies and initiations are sexual. I'm not saying they have sex. I'm going to say they have a sexual energy component. So you need to ask yourself, is that something you're into or not? I am not into it. It doesn't do anything for me. If I did it, it would be just so I could be initiated. And I have to ask myself, is that an okay thing? For me, it isn't. So while you're trying to find your path, you have to ask yourself, what are your, Laura, I think you said this, what are your boundaries?
Yeah.
What are your boundaries? And if you have an initiator, a group, please be forthcoming and please, please, please do not do something you don't want to do simply to get in. Okay, because if you don't, if you do that, your initiator won't know you're not okay with it. And then if they do something, you're going to have some type of either a conflict, a feeling, something. And I want people to be, it's better to be overly cautious and say, hey, here's what I'm into, here's what I'm not.
Yeah.
I'll step off my soapbox now.
I know, please, thank you for saying that, because I have been, and I have talked about this openly before. I was on a cult and I didn't know I was on a cult, and it was a cult of about native and indigenous traditions of Mexico, and my soul keep pulling me back out of this group, but my mind and my eagerness to learn the traditions keep throwing me back. And like that, I struggled for probably 6 years until I finally was verbally abused enough that my psyche finally connect with everything that was feeling inside of me that was so icky, that I left the group. And then years later, all these allegations came out in the open, that he not only abused people mentally and emotionally, but it's alleged that it was also physical and sexual abuse. So emphasis on alleged, I'm not privy or witness to that. So sometimes our eagerness to please the person that is leading blind us from our personal feelings of, this feels icky, this feels like is not right. And I think another red flag when you're trying to find a path, and we have talked about this before, is if the person wants to be on a pedestal, and the person wants to be venerated, and the person wants to say, it's only my rules, it's only my way or no way, that's not it. Because that person that is on the leading position is there because they're hungry for power. And I don't think that's where you want to be. You don't want your teacher or mentor or leader to be a power hungry person, because you are there to supposedly learn how to harness your power. And if they're teaching you that the only person with power, it's like the song by Beyonce, like, we rule the world, girls will rule the world, but I'm the queen bee. That is not feminism, period. And I dropped my mic. And that's all I have to say. Aaron, save me.
If think about the group and the leader, and if they were to unexpectedly pass tomorrow, can the group survive? Is there a plan in place? Are there other connections that are strong, or is it all just about that person? And if it cannot survive that situation, then yeah, you might be in a highly personal centered cult.
Yeah, and that's that's kind of hard, because when we're brand new to the craft and we're trying to learn, and someone seems to have all the answers. One of the things that I want to put out here is, all of us leaders, priests, mentors, teachers, we're all human, and we screw up and we say the wrong thing, and we're human. I mean, we try and we mess up, but a good leader, a good teacher apologizes, and it's heartfelt and it means something. Like sometimes when someone brings something to my attention, I might have to sit with it to like, oh, I offended you. Okay. Oh, let me sit and, oh, now I see it. I am so sorry. I did not mean that. Sometimes we have to sit with it, not because we don't believe you. It's just that if I'm going to apologize, I want to really understand and grow from that experience. I don't want to be like, oh, he's mad, I should say sorry and move on. I don't like to do that, because I'm just going to get in trouble again. I don't want to do that. But with that, a teacher, a leader should have the same checks and balances as we all do. So if they do something you think is offensive, we should feel empowered to gently, politely say something. One of the things I always thought that was strange when I was teaching, or I had a member in my congregation, if I made a mistake and they're screaming at me and throwing things at me, okay, well, that's not okay. That's not okay. But having a conversation like, hey, Chris, that wasn't okay what happened. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. You should be able to have those conversations. If you don't think you can, that's kind of a red flag for me. If I can't say, hey, so-and-so, hey, let's have a conversation. When this happened, I felt this way because, and it's a conversation. But anyways, so that's just how I feel about leadership and things like that. Aaron, did you have anything to piggyback on that? Because I feel like I can see the hamster wheel turning.
No, that was it. And that conversation, they should be able to correct you in private, not, you shouldn't be shamed in front of the group. That's all I got to say.
And to be honest, I've never had someone in a public forum like throw things at me, but I have had people like snap at me and things like that. But at the same time, we're all human. I've snapped at people, or I've joked with people if they thought I was serious. I've had that too. But again, we're all learning here. And one of the things I would say a good leader, a good teacher is always a student. Always. There's never a time we're trying to learn and grow and just become better and just, and just try. Like, I will say, all of the teachers I've ever had, I've never had a teacher say, I know the truth. I've never had that. Thank goddess. So.
And speaking of teaching, I have had people coming to me saying like, are you mad? Like, is there something wrong? And I'm like, no, why? Oh, because you're so serious right now. And I'm like, because I'm teaching, So what I have learned is that I have to, because people know my humor. They know that I can hardly take anything serious. Though I'm very serious, and Aaron knows me better than anybody on this planet. I'm very anxious. So it's probably my anxiety where I don't want to fuck up during the class. So it translates into like this very like super serious, hyper-focused persona. And then a student will come to me like, are you mad? Did I do something wrong? And I'm like, no, honey, why? Well, because you're so serious, because I'm on teaching mode, but I love that, and pardon the self-reference, but I love that my apprentices are able to come and tell me like, hey, what's wrong, without fearing that there's going to be a consequence for the comment.
Exactly.
So I'm like, no, I'm in teaching mode, and I'm like focusing and making sure that I don't forget things. But I totally agree with you. We're always learning, and whoever says I know it all, like, no, you don't. And you need to go back to the basics, especially on humbleness. And you hear that from super egotistical Laura Gonzalez. Humbleness is the thing, because nobody is an expert. And going back to choosing the path, I will say to folks, it's very shiny and bright to try to embrace everything. And to try to be good at everything, and to try to learn all the things. And it is so wonderfully liberating when you can sit down and say, you know what, I don't know, fill the blank. I'm not good at fill the blank. I'm not going to do this fill the blank. I'm not good at ceremonial magic, but I know two folks that are fantastic at ceremonial magic. So why don't you go with Aaron or go with Chris? Because they do the thing and they know how to do it. Me, I'm more like a hands-on. Let's hit the shed and get it done, kind of thing, which is folk magic. So to understand your abilities, but also to embrace your limitations and to get a rooster. I was talking to one author on a podcast the other day. Whatever happened to the phone tree? We don't do the phone tree anymore. And we should have a phone tree where, like, I don't do runes, but so-and-so does runes. And I don't do Reiki, but so-and-so does Reiki. People that you know, people that you trust. So when you get apprentices or when you need help by something that you cannot do, like, oh, this person does it and I can rely, because that is how you build community.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
really 2023, if someone comes up to you, someone fresh out of the broom closet and says, I want to learn witchcraft, and not Reiki, not ceremonial magic, specifically witchcraft, do they need a teacher? I'm inclined to say no. In this day and age, like, you don't need a teacher.
It depends. It depends, because I will say having a teacher really advanced my craft. I'm not going to lie. However, once I had that teacher who taught us, Aaron and I had the exact same teacher. When you learn your foundation and you learn how to incorporate information or whatever, now I can read any tradition and understand it and put it in my own practice if I choose. On the other hand, you just see I go back and forth. We do have like Zoom classes and things like that. However, and I haven't in a long time. I used to teach private classes on Zoom all the time, and even that though, like as a teacher, I can see your aura, I can see your energy, I can see your psychic centers and things like that. But it's still not the same as being in person, because whenever I'm teaching the exact same class online, it is so much harder. It is so much harder. It just is. Maybe I haven't found the secret of teaching online, but it just is.
I want you to respond, Laura, but just real quick to Chris, because we did have the same teacher, and I've been vocal for years that I had really good teaching. So I'm really thankful for that. But I will say to someone who I may be meeting who's interested in witchcraft, they might not be looking for all the things that we were instructed in, because
True.
It wasn't specifically witchcraft, and they could have a meaningful, heartfelt practice without it. Laura.
I can only hope people need a teacher, for I am an online teacher of spells and crafts. So yes.
Okay, so people need a teacher.
You need a teacher. You need me as your teacher. No, I agree with what Chris says, and if you really listen to all three of us, we are all flip-flopping. We are all going back and forth with almost everything, because I don't think that one thought can actually be exclusive. Right. Two things can be existing on the same, such as the life of paradoxes. I wish for a teacher, and I didn't have a teacher for a long, long time. And I learned my witchcraft and my folk magic by observation, by listening, by following in Mexico, And then when I came to the United States, I have this wonderful teacher of witchcraft, Wicca, and paganism. And I owe him a lot, Marty Couch. I owe him a lot because I learned a lot from him. But then at the same time, I also learned a lot of things that I didn't want to do in my craft, things that I didn't want to become. By other teachers and by observing other people in the craft. So I think being in community and learning from other people is fantastic, because you learn what you want and you also learn what you don't want.
Hmm.
But there are so many resources out there. There's so many books by so many
And
wonderful
videos and
people,
podcasts and
videos and podcasts, and on the same breath, there are a lot of podcasts that I'm like, who give this person a microphone? Because not everybody that can grab a microphone should. Just saying. So yes and no. I mean, you need, I'm gonna say it. There are things that I have learned at TikTok. And I don't think TikTok is the best place to learn, but I also don't think it's not a place where you can learn something. You can learn a lot. So to me, it boils down to be logical. Be logical. Be logical. Use your logic. Use your mind. And don't just go for the first shiny thing that appears in front of you.
very true. So on that, we're over time. I love this conversation. I love this conversation. I can talk about it for hours and hours and hours. My closing thought is that find what you enjoy, find what you like lights that fire, and can go from there. Laura, closing thought.
Never quit learning.
Mm-hmm,
Try everything at least once.
mm-hmm.
Mushrooms is iffy, but everything else, try at least once. And very important, if you try something and the teacher discouraged you because of the way they teach, but you like that something, try to find that same something elsewhere. Because sometimes people get discouraged because of the teachers, not
Yes,
because they're bad
indeed.
at the thing. So, keep trying, and you'll find your path, and also give yourself permission to move from that path if
Mhm.
at a certain given time doesn't work for you anymore.
Cool,
Aaron?
cool.
Just, yeah, pay attention to what feels like a strength, pay attention to your limitations, and get Chris's upcoming book, because you will have a very fun, crooked path into witchcraft.
And here's the book one more time.
The Black
All right.
Book.
Thank you so much for joining us. This was fun. If you aren't following us, Laura Gonzalez, Fader Aaron, and myself online, please do. We're on Aaron, are you on Instagram? You're on Instagram.
Yes, Storybook Podcast on Instagram.
Yeah, so follow us on Instagram, our Facebook pages, because normally I would just say all of our events, but between the three of us, that's a whole nother show itself. So anyway, have a good night, and we shall see you soon. I'm going to stop
Night, night.
recording if I can. Where is the button? I can't find the button.
Control D.
Control D. You know what? Let me turn off Facebook. Oh, here it is.